Amelia is my name. And if someone had told me that a casual visit to an SAA one summer afternoon would completely alter my life, I wouldn't have believed them. By the age of 38, I had resigned myself to a life of quiet dissatisfaction. Marrying Thomas, a wealthy man nearly 2 decades older, seemed like a logical decision. He was charming, accomplished, and offered me the security I had lacked in previous relationships. Yet, as time passed, the initial spark between us faded, overshadowed by his frequent business trips and emotional distance. Our grand estate became my solitary domain, and our marriage felt more like a business arrangement than a partnership. Ethan, Thomas's 22-year-old son from his first marriage, was everything his father was not: vibrant, spirited, and surprisingly perceptive. After graduating college, he returned home, claiming it was to save money before launching his career. But I sensed there was more to his return than he admitted. Ethan had an undeniable presence that commanded attention. His quick wit, easy confidence, and striking blue eyes drew people to him effortlessly. Despite my efforts to maintain propriety as his stepmother, the unspoken tension between us grew stronger with each passing day. One sweltering summer afternoon, the oppressive silence of the house became unbearable. With Thomas away again, Ethan and I were left alone. I busied myself with trivial tasks, cleaning already spotless rooms and skimming books I didn't care about. Eventually, I remembered the SAA near the pool house, a part of the property I rarely used. Donning a silk robe over my swimsuit, I headed there, hoping the warmth would calm my restless thoughts. The cedar-scented air enveloped me as I stepped inside, and the low hum of the heating unit filled the silence. I allowed myself to relax, the solitude providing a brief escape. My eyes closed as I soaked in the heat, letting my mind wander. The quiet was broken by the sound of the door sliding open. Opening my eyes, I saw Ethan enter, a towel casually draped around his hips. "I didn't know anyone else used this," he remarked, a playful smirk on his lips. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to mask my surprise. "I could ask you the same," he replied, leaning against the wall. "I thought you didn't like saunas." "I don't," I admitted. "But today is an exception." He shrugged and sat down across from me. His presence filled the small space, and no matter how hard I tried, my gaze kept wandering to his toned physique and damp hair. The tension between us seemed to intensify in the thick, heated air. After a moment of silence, Ethan spoke softly. "Are you okay?" "Why do you ask?" I hesitated. "You seem off lately," he replied, his voice laced with concern. "Like something's been bothering you." "It's nothing," I lied, attempting to deflect his attention. "Is it my dad?" he pressed gently. "You don't have to pretend, Amelia. I can see it." His candor caught me off guard. "He's always gone," I admitted quietly. "Sometimes it feels like I don't even exist to him." Ethan leaned in slightly, his expression serious. "You deserve more than that. You deserve to be valued, to be seen." His words sent an unexpected shiver through me, despite the heat. I averted my gaze, unsure of how to respond, until I felt his hand lightly rest on mine. "You're not alone," he said, his touch both soothing and electrifying. The intensity in his blue eyes unsettled me. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice barely steady. "You don't have to say anything," he murmured, leaning closer. "I know this is complicated, but I can't ignore how I feel when I'm with you." His confession hung between us, heavy and undeniable. My heart raced as I struggled to find words, but nothing came. "This isn't right," I whispered, the words trembling on my lips. "But it feels right," he countered, his voice steady and resolute. "Doesn't it?" I hated how much I agreed with him, how my body betrayed my mind. The sauna's heat seemed to pale in comparison to the warmth spreading through me. Ethan leaned in, his face inches from mine. "I see you, Amelia," he whispered. "Not as my father's wife, but as the incredible woman you are, and I can't pretend I don't." Those words shattered my restraint. Without thinking, I closed the gap between us, pressing my lips to his in a hesitant kiss. It started softly, testing the boundaries of what we both knew was forbidden. But as his hand cupped my face, the kiss deepened, and all hesitation dissolved. In that moment, nothing else existed but the magnetic pull between us, the intensity of a connection I had long suppressed. Ethan's hands slid to my waist, pulling me closer. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive, desired, and understood. The heat of the sauna mingled with the warmth of his touch, creating a sensation both intoxicating and overwhelming. My breath hitched as his fingers brushed the fabric of my robe. His touch was deliberate yet tentative, seeking permission I couldn't deny. Every rational thought vanished, replaced by the raw, undeniable energy that consumed us. This moment felt as surreal to him as it did to me. His warm breath brushed against my cheek, matching the frantic pace of my heartbeat. His hand moved to rest on my back, drawing me closer. "Amelia," he murmured, his voice trembling with emotion. He pulled back just enough to look into my eyes, his piercing blue gaze searching mine for any sign of reluctance. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his tone thick with desire. I couldn't. "Don't stop," I said softly, the words escaping before I could second-guess them. That was all the encouragement he needed. His lips returned to mine, this time more urgent and unrestrained. The kiss deepened, each movement expressing emotions we had both suppressed for so long. His hands traveled along my back, leaving trails of warmth even through the thin fabric of my robe. The heat in the sauna combined with the tension between us, creating an intensity that was almost overwhelming. Beads of sweat formed on my forehead, but I didn't care. The world beyond the wooden walls of the sauna ceased to exist. There were no rules, no labels, only us. His fingers paused at the knot of my robe, hesitating for a moment before loosening it. The silk slid from my shoulders and pooled at my feet. Instead of fear, I felt an unfamiliar sense of freedom. "Yes, you're incredible," he said, his voice husky and filled with awe. I pulled him into another kiss, desperate to feel more, to let go of everything I had kept locked away for so long. His touch grew bolder, exploring every inch of me, with a mix of reverence and longing. Time seemed to halt as we lost ourselves in each other. The outside world faded into nothingness. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel, without fear, without judgment. His lips trailed from my mouth to my neck, each kiss leaving me breathless. The creak of the sauna door abruptly snapped us back to reality. We froze, our breaths mingling as we strained to listen. After a tense moment, it was clear no one was there. But the interruption reminded us of the line we had crossed. "We should," I began, my voice uncertain. Ethan silenced me with a gentle finger to my lips. "No regrets, Amelia," he said firmly, his tone tender. And in that moment, I realized I didn't regret any of it. Not the kiss, not the touch, not the emotions we had unleashed. For the first time, I felt alive. But as we gathered ourselves, the weight of what had happened lingered heavily between us. Leaving the sauna, the silence was deafening, filled with the unspoken significance of what had just transpired. Ethan walked beside me, his hand brushing mine, as if unsure whether to reach for it or keep his distance. Inside the house, life seemed to continue as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Yet, every glance and subtle movement between us carried a charge that couldn't be ignored. I excused myself under the guise of checking my phone and retreated to my bedroom. Leaning against the door, I exhaled a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My mind raced, replaying every detail of what had happened. The intensity of Ethan's gaze, the electricity of his touch, the fire he had reignited within me. How had this happened? My much younger stepson had awakened something I thought was buried long ago. Guilt crept in, but it mingled with an unexpected sense of liberation. This wasn't just complicated, it was dangerous. A soft knock on the door startled me. "Amelia," Ethan's voice called, low and hesitant. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the handle before opening the door. Ethan stood there, his hair slightly tousled, his expression a mix of concern and longing. "Are you okay?" he asked, stepping inside without waiting for an answer. I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. "I just need time to think." He stepped closer, his presence filling the room. His question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. "Ethan, what happened?" "It was real," he interrupted, his tone firm. "It wasn't just a fleeting moment, Amelia. You felt it too." I couldn't deny it. The connection, the passion, it was undeniable. But that didn't make it right. "We have to be careful," I said, my voice unsteady. "My father doesn't see you," Ethan cut in, his voice sharp. "He's so wrapped up in his work and his life outside this house. You deserve more than being an afterthought." His words pierced me, reigniting the loneliness I had felt for years. Without thinking, I moved closer, reaching out for his touch. "Ethan," I whispered, barely audible. He cupped my face with gentle hands, his touch soft and full of care. "I don't care about what's right or wrong," he said, locking eyes with me. "I care about you." Before I could respond, his lips found mine again. This kiss was different, deeper, more desperate, as if we both understood how fleeting this moment might be. Breathless, I pulled away, my hands resting on his chest. "Ethan, this can't be our reality," I said, my voice shaking. "We have to be cautious." He nodded, but his determined gaze betrayed him. "I can't let this go, Amelia. I won't." In the days that followed, our stolen moments and whispered confessions continued. We tiptoed along the edge of secrecy and discovery, careful not to arouse suspicion. Ethan found excuses to linger at the house, offering help with chores or simply staying close. Every interaction was charged with tension. Our touches lingered, our glances heavy with unspoken emotions. The intensity of what we shared grew, along with the risks it brought. One evening, as I prepared dinner, Ethan entered the kitchen. He stood behind me, his presence overwhelming. His hands settled on my waist as he leaned in, his breath warm against my neck. Need help with anything? He asked, his voice laced with playful teasing. I turned to face him, my pulse quickening. Ethan, we can't keep doing this, I said, though my conviction was faltering. His smirk unsettled me, exuding an unsettling confidence. Then tell me to leave, Amelia. Tell me you don't feel the same, and I'll walk away, he replied. I couldn't force myself to say the words. One evening, the inevitable happened. A text from Ethan's father appeared on my phone. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. I sat on the couch, staring at the screen, the weight of my choices pressing down on me. Ethan entered the room, noticing my troubled expression. He's not coming home, is he? He asked, sitting beside me. I shook my head, unable to speak. Reaching for my hand, he offered silent comfort. You don't have to go through this alone, Amelia, he said, his voice carrying a vulnerability that broke down my last defenses. I turned to him, tears welling up as my emotions overflowed. What are we doing, Ethan? How can this possibly work? I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't respond with words. Instead, he pulled me into his arms, holding me as my tears spilled freely. It happened on a quiet evening, one that felt deceptively safe. Ethan and I sat in the living room, the atmosphere charged with the intimacy we had built. The soft glow of candlelight added warmth to the space, enhancing the closeness between us. Ethan sat beside me, his hand resting lightly on my knee, a small gesture that carried immense meaning. We talked about trivial things, his university assignments, the weather, and weekend plans. Yet, the way he looked at me, his gaze lingering a moment too long, made even the most mundane conversation feel significant. Then the front door opened unexpectedly. At first, I didn't process the sound, but when Thomas walked through the doorway, his coat slung over his arm, time seemed to stand still. He stopped in the entryway, his eyes narrowing as they took in the scene. First, his gaze landed on Ethan, sitting too close to me. Then it shifted to me, darkening as he noticed the candles, the wine glasses, and the intimate atmosphere. What's going on here? Thomas's voice was sharp, cutting through the tension. Ethan stiffened beside me, his hand retreating from my knee. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding. Thomas, I didn't expect you home so early, I said, my voice shaky. Clearly, he replied, his tone dripping with suspicion, as his eyes darted between us, searching for answers. It's not what it looks like, Ethan said, standing as well, though his words lacked conviction. Thomas's expression grew darker, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Then tell me what it is, Ethan, because from where I'm standing, it looks like something's going on between my wife and my son. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and damning. Thomas, please, I began, but he cut me off. Don't, he snapped. Don't lie to me, Amelia. I'm not a fool. Ethan stepped forward, his jaw set. You're right. Something is happening. My breath hitched. I turned to Ethan, my eyes wide with disbelief. Ethan, no, I whispered, but it was too late. Thomas's face flushed red with rage. You little... He took a step toward Ethan, but I quickly moved between them, raising my hands. Stop! Both of you, just stop! I shouted, my voice cracking. This is my fault. All of it. Don't blame Ethan. Thomas glared at me, his eyes a mixture of betrayal and disbelief. You're damn right it's your fault, he spat. I trusted you, Amelia. I brought you into this house, made you part of this family, and this is how you repay me? Tears threatened to fall, but I refused to let them. You've been absent, Thomas, I said, my voice breaking. You've been so consumed with work and everything else that I've felt invisible for years. I made a mistake, a terrible one, but don't act like you're blameless. Thomas looked stunned, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled for words. Ethan reached for my hand, his touch steadying me. Don't talk to her like that, Ethan said firmly. You've ignored her, treated her like she doesn't matter. She deserves better. Thomas turned on Ethan, his anger reigniting. And you think you're better? That you can step in and play the hero? The argument escalated, accusations flying back and forth. Standing between them, my heart broke as the two people I cared about tore into each other. Finally, I couldn't bear it anymore. Stop! I screamed, my voice cracking. This is over. All of it. Both men fell silent, staring at me. I'm leaving, I said, my voice barely audible. This family's broken and it's my fault. I can't stay here and make it worse. Ethan looked devastated, reaching for my hand again. Amelia, don't. I have to, I said firmly, pulling away. This isn't right, Ethan. It never was. Thomas said nothing, his face a mask of hurt and fury. I walked to the bedroom, my heart heavy as I packed my belongings. Tears streamed down my face, but I knew it was the only way. That night, I left without looking back. I moved into a small apartment across town, starting over in a life that felt both freeing and lonely. Ethan reached out, calls, messages, voicemails, but I didn't respond. Soon after, Thomas filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The rift between Ethan and his father seemed beyond repair. I often thought of Ethan, of the passion we shared and the fallout it caused. The memory was bittersweet, a haunting reminder of the scars some choices leave behind. Those wounds, though painful, taught me who I truly was. In the end, I had to let Ethan go, not because I didn't love him, but because loving him had nearly destroyed us both.